Hello, my name is Edwin Garcia, and welcome back to my channel. Today, I'd like to talk to you about the 5 podcasts every musician should be listening to. Now, podcasts have been on the rise for quite a few years now. It seems like everyone has a podcast. I have a podcast, the VGM Video Game Music Podcast, so make sure you're checking that out. If you're on my YouTube channel, you're already in the right place. Just scroll down and check out the latest ones I have. But anyway, when it comes to music, it seems like music would be perfect for podcasts because it's essentially the radio. You get to hear the audio and listen to the show for however long the duration is, and it comes on a regular schedule, just like radio shows have in the past and still do today. So I was thinking about the podcasts that I think every musician should listen to, and I brought it down to the top 5 here. So in no particular order, just however I kind of was thinking of them, I wrote them down. So they're not ranked, it's just top 5. So the first one I want to talk about is Music Biz Weekly. Now, Music Biz Weekly is generally 2 guys. They're just talking there on what it sounds like, the music business on a week-to-week basis. They talk about current trends, kind of new articles that captivated them. Sometimes they do reports. They do things that are being reported about how much music is being streamed and what sales are looking like and what tours are looking like and what merchandising profits are looking like for certain artists. So they just talk about kind of the current trends and what's going on. And they also have people who are being interviewed on the show from time to time if they have someone who, let's say, is a marketing person for SoundCloud or something like that. They'll have someone like that. They have industry leaders and experts talking about the subjects that they are knowledgeable on to educate the audience. So, again, any musician, 100%, you got to check out this podcast. You have to listen to it as much as you can, or at least the topics that you think are going to be important to you. Sometimes I do skip an episode if I know it's very heavy on something that literally has nothing to do with what I do, but for the most part, you should listen to all of it, even if you think it's not important to you. I remember I listened to the one they did on the Facebook Messenger application and how to use Facebook Messenger well, and I thought it would be something I'm not interested in, but once I listened to it, I'm like, oh, that's an interesting perspective. I need to check it out. So, Music Biz Weekly. It's an absolute must-listen-to podcast if you're a musician. All right, moving on. Next up is 20,000 Hertz. Now, 20,000 Hertz I think is good for anyone, but definitely musicians. They really focus on sound, and they talk about sound and the history of sound based on the topic that's being discussed. For example, recently they talked about ASMR and how that's been on the rise, what that is, why people like it, what they use it for, things like that. They've done podcasts on phone tones and different sounds that we hear on a daily basis, how apps use sound to keep the audience engaged and interested and not angered by the sounds that the app has, right? And they've done a recent one as well about like the 808 drums, very famous or popular hip-hop drum pattern, the 808 beats and all that kind of stuff, and they kind of talk about the history of the 808 drum and its impact on hip-hop and culture in general. So it's just a really interesting podcast where it kind of takes you out of just, listening to music and more about, the history and the types of ways we interact with sound and how sound impacts us on a daily basis. So it's really fascinating and can be a different perspective on sound that maybe even musicians don't have. So I think it's definitely one to check out. All right, moving on. Number 3, Song Exploder. Now, Song Exploder is great because what Song Exploder does is they have an artist come in every single episode and break down one of their hit records or impactful records or whatever record they want to unpack, and they talk about it piece by piece, how it was made, the history of the song. So it's really interesting. You don't have to worry about keeping up with it or anything like that. They're all kind of in the same ilk, which is an artist is breaking down their song. And sometimes you get real interesting tidbits of the history. Sometimes they go very specific about the structure. I built the drums like this, and then I added the guitar like this, and I thought of these songs when I made these piano chords, things like that. So it's really interesting, and it's really cool to hear them kind of break down the whole song from idea to the actual existence of it, and then at the end they play the song, so you have like the full depth of how it was made, and then you get to hear a complete finished product at the end. So I think it's a wonderful podcast that every musician should be listening to. All right, number 4, DIY Musicians Podcast. Now, DIY Musician Podcast is by the people who work at CD Baby, and CD Baby is a website that helps get your music online. I know I sound like I'm an ad here. I do like CD Baby, and I do use CD Baby, but I'm not sponsored in any way. I would love to be, but I am not. So it's just my honest opinion. I think it's the best way to get your music out there in a professional way, so you don't have to worry about it getting taken down, or just have people who know what they're doing help you along your journey on releasing your music. So they have a podcast, and they just find stories really about ways to succeed and success in the music business. So it's really great because all their podcasts are kind of like timeless. They talk about the 5 things you need to do before you release a record, and should you release a record or should you release a single. And they talk about current trends as well, how to release a music video nowadays, the benefits of Facebook, the benefits of YouTube, what platforms you need to be on. They have people also come in, they interview artists who, maybe an artist was very successful, selling t-shirts or something, and they'll talk about how the merchandise impacted their career, and ways that it can impact yours and things like that. So they're a phenomenal podcast. Can't recommend them any more than I already have. They're just so good, and I think they come out twice a month, so every 2 weeks, so it gives you some time, just a little bit of space. And yeah, it's just phenomenal. Every musician needs to be up to speed on what DIY Musicians Podcast talks about. All right, and the final one, number 5, Portfolio Composer. Now, Portfolio Composer, this one, maybe not every single musician, but I think virtually every single musician will benefit from. It's hosted by Garrett Hope, and he talks about composition with composers, and talk about the process, talk about the business aspect, talk about their careers. So every episode you kind of get a sneak peek into the life of a composer, and a little bit in depth into how they do what they do. So it's really interesting because it's kind of like you just feel like you're part of like a roundtable discussion about that person's career and how it connects to you, and advice they have for other musicians, other composers. And again, not everyone maybe identifies as a composer, but pretty much everyone makes music. There's a few people who maybe just do the wedding band gigs and things like that, but for the most part, a lot of us are creating our own art, our own music, and a lot of the things you hear from Portfolio Composer will apply to virtually every musician, and I definitely think it's something that every musician should be listening to, or at least giving a try. Now, I left a few miscellaneous ones here, so I'm just going to run down them really quick as podcasts that you should check out in case, maybe that wasn't enough for you, or you heard of all of those podcasts already. I can at least give you some value and a few other ideas that maybe, you didn't think about or know about. So NPR, they have a whole bunch of music podcasts. You can just look up NPR Music, and a whole list of them will come out. So yeah, NPR has some good music-based ones like First Listen, things like that. Also, remember, I just mentioned podcasts are like the radio. Some people have like the radio channels on their podcast app, or they have a podcast episode version of the radio channels, which is really great because you can get an hour with no commercials and just little tidbits about the songs. So that's a really great thing to check out. And then all you gotta do is just know what genre you're looking for. Just put in a search engine, jazz music or rock music, rock podcast, and you'll get some stuff that I'm sure you'll be really excited about. One that I like is In the Groove, Jazz and Beyond, and they really just focus mainly on jazz. It can stretch out a little bit, that's why it says and beyond. But overall, it is just jazz music, and it's like an hour plus of jazz music. And the radio host just talks a little bit about the songs, a little bit about the history, real quick, just gives you a little bit more enhanced knowledge before you jump into the music. But it's mainly just music, man, and it's great. It comes out every Sunday, I believe, and it's just the phenomenal podcast. And if you're not a big jazz fan, there are other podcasts of that ilk that you can find on the genres that you're interested in. Okay, then Soundcast, great podcast if you're into film scores and TV scores. They really go in depth, especially in film scores, and talking about the latest movies from the composer perspective, and what they liked about the themes, what they didn't like about the themes. It's really brilliant. And finally, my last one I want to shout out is Listening to Ladies. It's a podcast about female composers, and it really just talks about their life, their biggest pieces of work, advice they have for budding composers, and it's just really powerful. And almost every single episode, I'm learning about a new female composer I didn't know about. So it's really enhanced me because I just get a new composer to be following every single time they release an episode. So that's really awesome. So again, podcasts are an incredible way to listen to music and enhance your knowledge and hopefully even motivation. Podcasts like Song Exploder definitely inspire me, and Music Biz Weekly and DIY Musicians podcast educate me, and 20,000 Hertz and Song Exploder just kind of add the inspiration and a little bit of knowledge as well. So they're really a great way to enhance your knowledge and appreciation, because even as musicians, sometimes we need a break, and it's not necessarily a break to listen to more of that, but it just kind of puts you in a different zone with music. And I think our relationship with music falls into different tiers, whether we're creating, educating, or learning ourselves. So podcasts are a great way to learn. I think every single person, especially Music Biz Weekly, DIY Musicians podcast, absolute must. It's more important than any other educational tool you have is those two podcasts, to be honest with you. So definitely recommend listening to them, and if you haven't, check them out. If you think there's some that do those things just as well and you'd want to shout them out, leave them down in the comments below. If you got any cool podcasts that I should be checking out, just let me know in the comments below, and I'll be definitely excited to check them out. I have a lot of long drives, as many musicians do, going from gig to gig and coming back home, and podcasts are a great way to keep myself nourished musically and pass the time and learn more and have fun listening to them. So, and those are my top 5. I'd love to hear yours. All right, make sure you like and subscribe to this video. I'll be releasing my VGM podcast itself next week. I'll be talking about the music in Castlevania 4, and thank you for watching this video. All right, I'll see you next time.